Let's go over Barry Morphew's preliminary hearing, which happened day number 2, August 10th, 2021. Barry Morphew's text to Suzanne talking about if he could overcome his hurt heart and her distant unlovingness. In this court transcript reading, Barry Morphew's lawyer, Iris Eaton, gets admonished from the judge for bringing up Suzanne's affair one more time and the fact that Suzanne's best friend, Sheila Oliver, didn't know about it. The prosecution said, I think you've brought this up like 50 times now. And Sheila did advise Suzanne to tuck away some money. Suzanne told Sheila about money she was arguing with Barry, trying to get back, that he sank into some type of investment. Meanwhile, Barry was complaining about $70,000 in cash in a safe, and when the cops had confiscated it, supposedly the 70 grand was missing. Iris Eaton is trying to blame that on the cops, even claiming Suzanne took it. You know, she was still playing the Gone Girl role at this point. Suzanne had texted Sheila about Barry having a secret life or wanting a secret life, and Suzanne admitting, look, we've both done our share of damage in this marriage. They talk about April 21st when Suzanne woke up. Jeff had texted her, wish I woke up next to you. And in the meantime, Suzanne's daughter, Macy, had said, Dad made biscuits. She texted Suzanne, but Suzanne texted back an hour later around 9:17 a.m. saying, I just woke up. You know, all of these questions and details about time and confusion, it causes Judge Murphy to warn them, look, Iris Eaton, you are burning up time. You are burning up so much time in her defense of Barry, her line of questioning. But Barry and Suzanne, either or, said that 80% of their arguments were about money. There's even spy pen recordings out there, hopefully we'll hear them at some point, where the couple argues about money. Iris Eaton, meanwhile, is trying to drive home the fact that no one admitted to ever seeing Barry being physically abusive. Barry's lawyer just calls him super passionate about his job, and she chalks up any arguing that the couple may have had up to normal marital stuff. Then the witness, Agent Harris, did say that they tried to speak with Mallory early on. They spoke with her early on, but then they stopped being able to speak with her. Iris Eaton quickly dodges away from that topic, not wanting to talk about Mallory being uncooperative and talking with the police. It reminds me of Harley Hunt, who was Letitia Stauch's daughter, how she cooperated at first but then stopped talking to police, probably because she had a parent like Barry gaslighting her and saying, don't talk to those cops, they're only focused on me. Eventually Harley did the right thing. Eaton focuses on this May 6th text from Suzanne, where Suzanne texted Barry, look, I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. Iris Eaton tries to make it seem like it was a screenshot. It was so important to Barry that he screenshotted it. But no, the agent's going to say he tried to swipe it away and delete it, and it showed up in the cache. It got saved that way. And that was the first time Suzanne really told Barry, look, I'm done. Eaton also dug into reading all these BS texts, in my opinion, from Barry, saying, maybe I could get over my hurt heart and overcome your distant unlovingness towards me. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And who would cheat on you, Suzanne? You're the most beautiful, sweetest, kind woman ever. I think, Iris just wanted to get that stuff out in the open. I think Iris just wanted to read it so people could hear it. But there's a bunch of confusion about that Moonlight Pizza text, where Suzanne, that Friday night before she disappeared, she was telling Jeff Libler, her affair partner, look, I think I can talk to you. There was something about Moonlight Pizza. There's a lot of confusion about this. You'll hear it in the reading of the transcripts. The lawyers are confused. The judge gets confused. So I know people have a lot of questions about that. Iris Eaton is also digging into Suzanne's secret green dot bank account and really grilling the agent like, you guys didn't research this? And he doesn't remember everything. Again, she's making it sound like Suzanne had this secret plan to get away. They talk about Barry's curious internet searches from January 2020, find a cute girl near Salida. And of course, Iris Eaton interjects and objects to everything that's coming. She claims that Macy and Barry's phones are so intricately tied together. Everyone shares an iCloud account. In terms of naughty photos and Ashley Madison's searches and even this naughtier website search that's coming up that they talk about, Eaton is saying, look, you don't know for sure that was from Barry. That could have been any of them. That could have been Suzanne, searching for Ashley Madison. Life is short, have an affair, all that stuff. So Eaton really hones in and gets upset at this point when anything nefarious that Barry may have been searching for is brought up. But of course, Eaton really drives home all these claims from Barry. Oh, I'd never cheat on you, Suzanne. Prosecutor Lindsay says the image of Suzanne has been completely trashed by the defense, and it's fair to rehabilitate her image after all the destruction that they've put up there. I love when he said that, because I know it's a defense attorney's job to, of course, make their client shine, but you don't have to really go in so hard on the victim. And I love that he said that. They also talk about Holly Wilson and how she secretly recorded Barry, and Barry was telling Holly, oh, I think Suzanne is secreted away in some guy's basement, and if I find this guy, I'm going to shoot him in the testicles. And, you know, he got this really scary look on his face, and I wonder if it's not his truth spilling out when he started talking about what he would do to this imaginary guy. But Barry had looked Holly in the eyes, and he had a scary look. He had disturbing facial expressions, according to Holly. I mean, she was very bold for doing this and very brave. Holly even asked Barry, what's the last thing you said to Suzanne? And that's where he started stumbling. The last pictures of her in his mind, he couldn't clearly express. But allegedly, Barry told Holly he spent $50,000, paid some ex-FBI agent, some older guy, this money for intel that the cops didn't have, but he ended up not getting any intel back. He didn't get anything that the cops didn't already have. I don't really believe that. I doubt that Barry would sit up there and spend $50K, give it to some ex-FBI guy, if Barry might already have an image in his mind of the last thing he said to Suzanne and the last thing she said to him and the last image of her on Earth. So anyway, here we go. We're starting day 2. This will be another series of videos. And then we'll be done with day 2. I don't know if in days 3 and 4, if that's when more Moonlight Pizza talk comes up. We'll see if it happens in day 2. There's some question over whether Suzanne took a photo of Barry while waiting in line at Moonlight Pizza that Friday. Who knows? I have to see where that came from. As I'm reacquainting myself with all these transcripts, we'll find out. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Plunder. We are moving forward discussing the court transcripts in the matter of the people of the state of Colorado versus Barry Lee Morphew. This was day 2, Tuesday, August 10th, 2021 at 9:10 a.m. before Judge Patrick Murphy. Again, we're going to hear quite a bit from Iris Eaton, one of Barry Morphew's attorneys, and we're going to hear from Jeffrey Lindsay for the prosecution. We are still continuing with FBI Agent Kenneth Harris on the stand. Judge, the court calls case 21 CR 78 People versus Barry Morphew. Mr. Morphew appears in person. He's in custody. He's with his 2 attorneys, Ms. Eaton and Ms. Nilsson. And for the prosecution, we've got Mr. Pimbleton, Mr. Lindsay, District Attorney Stanley, and Mr. Hurlburt. This is day 2 of a preliminary hearing. I think where we left off was Agent Harris was still under cross-examination. Before I call him to the stand, are there any issues we need to address before we start? Mr. Lindsay, not from us. Judge, then let's get to it. Agent Harris, that oath I administered yesterday still applies. Witness, yes. Judge, go ahead, Miss Eaton. Miss Eaton, thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Agent Harris. Good morning. So yesterday you provided interpretation about text messages between Sheila Oliver and Suzanne Morphew in 2019 and 2020. Yes. And the messages were being sent and received between Suzanne and Sheila without Sheila's knowledge about Suzanne's secret life and love, correct? Mr. Lindsay. Judge, objection. Asked and answered again probably about 50 times now. Judge. Okay, so I think we've established that Sheila Oliver didn't know about the relationship, but I think this is just setting up another question. I'll allow it now, but we've got it. Miss Eaton. Sure. Correct. In September 2019, other messages between Sheila and Suzanne. Well, first let's go back. A message that you weren't shown yesterday but exists between Ms. Morphew and Ms. Oliver was on July 31st, 2019, where it's Ms. Morphew who says he's still got a secret life You recall that? I do. And then in September of 2019, Ms. Morphew tells Ms. Oliver he wants a secret life, correct? That sounds correct, yes. And then the following day, on September 2nd, 2021, she said, he wants me to be the bad guy, right? Correct. She must mean September 2019 because these dates are all over the place. She also said to Miss Oliver, I know it sounds so one-sided. I've done my share of damage, correct? Correct. And also on September 2nd, she says, quote, I went from sad yesterday to mad today. Typical for me once I think things through. No accountability on where he has his phone off, end quote. Correct? Correct. In September, Sheila starts advising, according to the text messages, Suzanne to tuck away a little money, right? Yeah, she's advising her to try to figure out how she could have some finances to be on her own. Yes. And they're discussing how the money that's been utilized in an investment between Suzanne and Barry, how they're going to make sure that money gets paid back to Suzanne after it's been spent. That's part of the conversation, right? Yes, they're discussing the fact that she's been talking to Barry about that, trying to get the money back. So let's talk about money for a little while. You talked about it yesterday a little bit. As you know, Barry and Suzanne's habit was to pay in many different circumstances, pay in cash. Is that right? Yes. And Barry Morphew told you when you interviewed him in March of 2021 that when he got the safe back after it was returned to him, that $70,000 in cash was missing from the safe. Mr. Lindsay, Judge, I object. Beyond the scope of direct. Judge, I'm lost on got the safe back. From who or from Ms. Eaton? Sure, I can back up a little bit. Mr. Morphew's safe in the garage was seized as part of this case, as part of the search warrant. Is that right? Correct. And it was searched thoroughly, right? I wasn't there, but it was searched. Yes. And you know that the contents of the safe, other than the firearms that were discussed yesterday, came back to Mr. Morphew after the house was searched a few months later. Mr. Lindsay, Judge, I'm still objecting beyond the scope. This was never discussed in Agent Harris's direct yesterday. Judge Murphy, well, if we're talking about the money, there's a tangent. Those texts did talk about money, and the money owed supposedly by Mr. Morphew to Ms. Morphew. What I'm confused about is Mr. Morphew saying law enforcement took that money out of the safe, or that Ms. Morphew did. Judge, okay, so I'll allow the questions because there is some relation to Mr. Lindsay. Judge, that's not a correct statement. He never alleges Ms. Morphew took it. He alleges law enforcement took it. That's the thread of his interview. He's confronting these guys that they took the money. Judge, I don't know. That could be true. And if so, we can certainly establish that either right now or when you redirect. Go ahead. Ms. Eaton, thank you. In March 2021, you interviewed Mr. Morphew, one of the various times you interviewed him, right? Correct. And that was actually, it might have been the second or third time where you were starting to reveal to Mr. Morphew this affair between Ms. Morphew and another individual, Mr. Libler. Yes, we revealed that on the very first conversation. Break in recording. So I'm not sure what happened during this portion, if the court audio or whomever was recording it had a failure, so we don't know what happened in between this portion. Ms. Eaton, I'm going to approach the witness one more time to confirm that date. April 22nd. Okay, this is not the same page you were looking at last time. Ms. Eaton, oh, I'm so sorry. That's okay. There was a number 5 right in the middle of one of the texts. Witness, Your Honor, I have my binder that has all these conversations in them. I don't have it up here with me. I can grab it if that would make this, Judge, probably faster if you get your binder. First, we have to get the date right, and then I've got to deal with the objection. Witness, I'm looking at a page that has April 22nd messages of 2020. Judge, okay, so we're talking about April 22nd, and correct me if I'm wrong, but those are not covered in exhibits 3 through 26, correct? Mr. Lindsay, no, Judge. Judge, so in general, I get what you're saying, that this is similar to what we've already heard, but I don't think these specific messages were addressed yesterday, so I'll overrule the objection. Ms. Eaton, so the text of those messages I just read occurred between 8:20 a.m. and 9:06 a.m. on April 22nd, is that correct? April 22nd, starting at 8:09, has a message from Jeff saying, quote, wish I had woke up next to you, end quote. I don't see the messages that you're referring to. I don't see an 8:20. Why don't you look at April 21st? I'd like to correct the record that it's April 21st, 2020. My apologies. And to refresh your recollection between 8:20 a.m. and 9:06 a.m. Yes, I see them. Since you have reviewed the texts, Suzanne and Macy's phone was downloaded as part of this investigation, is that right? It was collected May 2020. As far as I know, yes. And Macy Morphew texts her mom at 9:17 in the morning. Quote, are you up? Dad made biscuits, end quote. You recall that? On what morning? Sorry, the 21st. I don't recall that off the top of my head, no. And then, almost an hour later, at 9:17, Suzanne Morphew says to Macy, quote, I just woke up. Mr. Lindsay, Judge, I'm going to object beyond the scope. Judge, Miss Eaton, how does this link up to something on direct? Miss Eaton, because this talks about how when Ms. Morphew is texting Mr. Libler and how she is, and when she's texting him. The agent just said sometimes they communicate when Mr. Morphew is in the house. But that wasn't the objection, Judge. Judge Murphy, I think technically it is probably beyond the scope of the direct because this is more along the lines of what Ms. Morphew and her daughter were talking about. But I understand the context and why you're asking the question, so I'll allow it. I'll allow it for this particular question. I'll caution you, Miss Eaton, that you guys are burning through a lot of your time. You need to be aware of that. Thank you, Judge. So if you could ask the question again, Miss Eaton. At 9:17 a.m., Suzanne Morphew says to Macy Morphew, quote, I just woke up. Do you recall that between their texts? I don't recall the specific text. Okay. Now, Suzanne told Miss Oliver that she hoped she could find out if Barry was seeing somebody via the spy pen so Barry would just leave the relationship. I recall Suzanne saying in texts that she wished he would just leave. I don't remember the association specifically with the spy pen. So at the time of the spy pen, when it was provided to Ms. Morphew in February 2020, let me back up. When Mr. Morphew was interviewed by you in January of 2020, he said that 80% of the arguments that he had with Ms. Morphew were about money. Again, I think they mean January of 2021. I think a lot of dates were just wrong in these transcripts, so I see why people had a hard time reporting this case and getting a solid timeline. When Mr. Morphew was interviewed by you in January of 2020, he said that 80% of the arguments that he had with Miss Morphew were about money. Again, that sounds like something he said. I don't have the transcript in front of me. We interviewed him for quite a number of hours. Miss Eaton, may I approach Your Honor? I'm refreshing his memory with the FBI timeline, page 3. Judge, yes, and thank you. Miss Eaton, the recording pen that was used had a recording on it where Suzanne, it had an argument between herself and Mr. Morphew, correct? Correct. And in that argument, Suzanne Morphew says, quote, it's all about money. 80% of our arguments are because of money, end quote. Yes, I remember her saying it's all about money. I don't remember the 80% comes from there or not. I'm not clear on that, but yes, she said it's all about money. And she added, quote, it's about money, end quote, right? Yes. And you know a lot of the arguments between Suzanne, from what you've investigated between Suzanne and Mr. Morphew, are about money. And also Ms. Morphew accusing Mr. Morphew of having an affair, correct? So can I ask where you're pulling that from? Yeah, she tells Ms. Oliver, she tells Mr. Baumonk that she believes Mr. Morphew is having an affair, and then she is. Multiple statements by Ms. Morphew, including the argument that they have on May 6th, where Mr. Morphew's responding back to Ms. Morphew that I'm not having an affair, I would never cheat on you. You recall that? Yes. I think at this point she meant Ms. Balmuck. Melinda, who is Suzanne's sister, 15 years her senior. So it appears that they argued she would accuse him of having an affair, right? Yes. And they'd have arguments about that, correct? Yes. So you talk about, yesterday you testified about text messages between Ms. Morphew and Ms. Oliver in March 2020. Again, Suzanne is revealing an argument, some kind of dispute between herself and Mr. Morphew during those text messages, correct? Correct. And Ms. Oliver asks, quote, did something bring this on? End quote. Correct. And Ms. Morphew says, do you remember? I don't remember. Money, right? Money stuff. Yes, that sounds familiar, yes. There is no message in March 2020 during this exchange with Ms. Oliver where she says, and my husband Barry is accusing me of having an affair, right? There's no such statement between herself and Ms. Oliver. I do not remember one. I don't have all those texts in front of me, but I don't remember one. And this argument about money that Ms. Morphew is talking about in March 2020 is corroborated by the spy pen recording of March 22nd, 2020, where you hear Ms. Morphew and Mr. Morphew, who is in a car and being recorded, arguing about money, right? Yes, in that spy pen recording, they are arguing about money and other things. So yesterday you testified about this idea that Ms. Morphew wanted to get divorced or separated, correct? Correct. And what you see in the text messages in March 2020 was that Suzanne tells Sheila that Suzanne went to Macy about getting a divorce, correct? She said they had a conversation. Yes, I don't know that it says, she does not indicate that she went to Macy, but that they ended up having a conversation about it. Yes. Nothing about Barry and Suzanne going to Macy, just Suzanne going to Macy, correct? Well, there's conversations about Barry pulling Macy in and her standing up to him at some point. Not in March 2020 though. Not in March 2020, no. Right. So let's talk about what Macy and Mallory knew. Neither Macy or Mallory called their parents' marriage perfect, correct? I don't remember if there's any place where they use the word perfect or not. Okay, they never said that it was, that they didn't have fights, right? Arguments? I'm sorry, are you asking me whether they were asked if they had fights? They were asked about, both the daughters were asked about what they witnessed in the relationship with their parents, right? Right. That was an important aspect to your investigation, wasn't it? Yes. Right. And what you learned was that their parents argued, right? Yes. Normal marriage stuff is what Mallory and Macy both said. I don't remember the specific quote, but that sounds about right, doesn't it? Yes. Macy was asked specifically, and this is part of the victimology packet, did not see her dad being physically abusive, correct? Correct. Macy said, I do not see my dad being physically abusive, correct? Are you saying that's in the victimology packet? Yes, correct. Miles Harvey, Macy's boyfriend, who spent a lot of time with the family, correct? Correct. Said he didn't, nor didn't hear of Mr. Morphew being physically abusive from anyone, correct? Ms. Eaton, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just don't have those in front of me, so you're quoting them. If I could see them, that would just be helpful. Sure, based on your investigation, you didn't learn anything from Miles Harvey that he heard of Mr. Morphew being physically abusive, correct? Correct. What you heard from Miles was that he did hear about parents' arguments, and he gave a reason because the dad was a workaholic and wasn't home enough, correct? Correct. Mr. Harvey said they argued like parents do. Barry wakes up really early and is off to work. Sorry, just to make sure, you said Mr. Harvey, you still mean Miles? Miles Harvey, yes. Yes, correct. And Miles Harvey also said that Barry is absent from the home, super passionate about his job, and it is hard on Suzanne, correct? Again, I don't have that in front of me. But does it sound pretty close to what you've investigated in the case? Mr. Lindsay, Judge, I'm going to object. Speculation, Judge Murphy. No, that's not speculation. He'll know whether it sounds generally like a true statement. Or if you can't, just say I don't know. I just don't remember that particular statement of Miles. Miss Eaton. Mallory indicated through the investigation that her parents argued, but they never talked of divorce. You said through the course of the investigation? Yes. Mallory was spoken to early on, and we were not able to speak to her after that. So I think early on she made that statement. Let's get to May 6, 2020. You know that it appears through text messages that Mr. Morphew and Ms. Morphew had another argument, correct? Correct. And it was evidenced by a text message from Ms. Morphew on May 6th that said, quote, "I'm done. I could care less what you've been up to for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." Correct? Correct. And that was screenshotted at 10:13 a.m., correct? I don't believe it was screenshotted. I think, again, I'm not the expert on this. The way it was explained to me is that if somebody swipe deletes a text when it comes in, it stores it somewhere else in their memory. So it wasn't a screenshot made by Mr. Morphew or Miss Morphew. It would be when Mr. Morphew deleted it, it saved it somewhere else. So the time is unknown at this point, but the text was recovered, correct? I don't remember if there's a time associated with when it was deleted or not. I think there might be, but there's a time on that text. And later that day at 3:51 p.m., what appears to be is there was a fight about money again, correct? What are you referring to? At 3:51. Let's back up. At 2:43 p.m. that day, Suzanne received the following message from Barry. "I'm sorry if things went the way they did. I have a problem dealing with the way you accused me of hiding checks. If you think I'm as terrible of a person to hide our accounts and have ones you don't know about, you don't know me. All I do is for you and the girls. All. When I'm dead, which won't be long, you guys will be taken care of. Please stop being angry. If I can control my hurt heart, I think I can overcome your distant unlovingness toward me. Honey, I swear, it's the hardest thing I've had to do. I love you. I always will." Just to be clear, you said that's from Mr. Morphew to Suzanne, correct? Suzanne received the following message from Barry. Yes, and what he's commenting about is, it appears to be an argument about money, correct? It appears to be, yes. It also appears to be that they had an argument where Suzanne was once again accusing Mr. Morphew of having an affair, correct? Sorry, I was focused on the money part. Sure. At 3:51, Suzanne received another message from Mr. Morphew. "I promise you are wrong about all the crazy thoughts about me. I have always been faithful. Always. Why would I ever want another when I'm married to the most beautiful, sweet, kind, loving woman as you? Only a fool would stray from an angel like you, correct? Correct." Same day, 7:15 p.m., when Mr. Morphew went to get pizza from Moonlight Pizza, Ms. Morphew let Jeff Libler know that she was free to talk. She said at 7:18, "He's gone for a bit." That correct? Can I look on the messages? Yes. I'm having a hard time finding it. Can you remind me of the content again? Judge, he's gone for a bit. Can you talk? I don't see that on the night of May 6th in LinkedIn. Mr. Lindsay, look at May 8th. Ms. Eaton, May 8th. I apologize. May 8th, Judge. So the pizza thing is May 8th, not May 6th? May 8th. Now I'm getting confused. So May 8th, at what time in the evening? 7:18. I'm sorry, I'm not finding it. Okay, let me back up. On May 6th, there was this text argument we just talked about, correct? Correct. On May 7th, there's a text between the two of them saying how magical the last 2 days were, correct? Between Mr. Morphew and Mr. Liebler. Do you recall that text? I'm assuming they mean Ms. Morphew and Mr. Liebler, and I have no idea what they mean about how magical the last 2 days were if Suzanne texted that to Mr. Liebler. Already, some people are running with this and saying that means Suzanne and Jeff may have seen each other in Salida around these dates, but I have yet to see that in the court transcripts anywhere. But we'll keep reading. On May 7th, there's a text between the two of them saying how magical the last 2 days were, correct? between Mr. Morphew and Mr. Libler. Do you recall that text? Judge: I'm sorry, I'm lost. Miss Eaton: I'm backing up dates. So I'm backing up from Moonlight Pizza. Sorry. Okay, so backing up, there was a text argument that we talked about. The I'm done and the apologies and statements from Mr. Morphew on May 6th. Correct. May 7th. Yes, Mr. Libler and Ms. Morphew are texting, and one of the things they text to each other about is how magical the last 2 days have been. And what day was that? May 7th, 7:25 a.m. Ms. Eaton: can I please approach the witness and help? Judge: that's fine. Yes. Ms. Eaton: as you can see on May 7th, Ms. Morphew continues to text message between Mr. Libler a lot of the day, correct? Correct. Okay, so that might prove there if on May 7th, Ms. Morphew, Suzanne, is texting Mr. Libler a lot of that day, they likely did not see each other in person that day. Correct. But you remember from looking at the investigation that, and in your timeline, that at 4:43 on May 7th, Ms. Morphew lets her husband Barry know she's been studying all afternoon and had veggie soup on for dinner. You recall that? Yes, I recall that statement. And Ms. Morphew's next report about Barry being the report about Barry to Mr. Libler is on May 9th at 8:21 a.m. The next report about Barry where she says to Mr. Libler, after he asked her how her night was, and she said, I had a fine, quiet night. Picked up pizza and looked around town at houses for sale. Still talk of Arizona. Correct? Correct. So Ms. Morphew is telling Mr. Libler that she had a fine night with Mr. Morphew on May 8th. Correct? Yes. Mr. Lindsay: Judge, I'm going to object. That's very much speculation. Fine evening does not mean anything other than she had a fine evening, and who she was with or who she wasn't with, it's not in the text. That's complete speculation. Judge: it would help if we could get the testimony about the pizza. That got very confused because you had the date wrong. So I think if we can establish that they had pizza on the 8th and on the 9th, she said she had a fine night. I had pizza, there's a link there, but we don't have the pizza part yet. Okay, Miss Eaton. On May 8th at 7:15 p.m., Ms. Morphew lets Mr. Libler know that she can talk to him on WhatsApp. You said 7:15 on May 8th? Okay, we're going to move off the pizza, okay? Let's move to Suzanne's secret bank account. On April 23rd, 2020, Suzanne's Gmail account received a statement from her Green Dot account. Correct? I'm actually... Mr. Lindsay, I'm going to object. This is beyond the scope. Judge: Miss Eaton? Miss Eaton. Miss Eaton. Your Honor, this witness has talked about having being able to understand the makeup of the individuals who he's investigating, and has done a full investigation of who these people are, what they're about, and has reviewed, it sounds like, all of the messages and communications between individuals, one of which is an issue here, which is her secretive behavior and her secret bank account, which is highly relevant in this instance, especially when she's not been found. Mr. Lindsay: that came out in cross-examination, Judge. Judge Murphy: Agent Harris, I'm assuming that as a part of your victimology, wanting to know about bank accounts, especially bank accounts not known by the other spouse, would be important, correct? The witness: correct. Judge Murphy: so I think it covers it in when he started his testimony talking about what he did in this particular case. This would be relevant to him, so I'll overrule the objection. Ms. Eaton: so you know that on April 23rd, Suzanne's Gmail account received a statement from her Green Dot account, correct? Could I see the... Yes. Ms. Eaton: may I approach the witness? Judge: yes. Ms. Eaton: I've refreshed your recollection with the email from the Green Dot account. You reviewed that and see that it was received by Ms. Morphew on April 23rd, 2020 at 4:31 a.m. Was it 2020? I thought I saw 2019. 2020. Correct. And Green Dot is a bank account on the internet, correct? I believe so, yes. And you can buy Green Dot cards at the dollar store, Walmart, Target, right? I'm not familiar with where you can buy them. Okay, and the utilization of Green Dot is that you can withdraw and deposit money into a Green Dot account without having an actual bank to go to, correct? I'm not familiar with Green Dot. So you didn't research this Green Dot account that Ms. Morphew had? You didn't investigate that? I did not specifically. Are you aware if law enforcement investigated it? I am not aware. What about Ms. Morphew registering with Compass Royalty Management on April 10th? 2020. I'm not familiar. Okay. Did you not investigate that registration with this management company? Is this something that she received from her email? Yes. I don't recollect seeing that. No. I looked through her email. I don't recollect that particular email. And so you didn't follow up on it? It sounds like there was no investigation done pursuant to that. I don't know if there was no investigation done. I did not. Miss Eaton, I have no more questions. Judge, redirect, Mr. Lindsay. Redirect examination, Mr. Lindsay. Defense counsel yesterday alluded to an area of inquiry where law enforcement wasn't able to find anything on Mr. Morphew whether he was in fact having an affair, and there was some indications that he was potentially out there looking, right? Yes, there was. And you all found some screenshots from his cell phone, one of them being in January 2020, quote, find a cute girl near Salida, end quote. Ms. Eaton, Your Honor, I'd like to approach. I object to what's coming. Judge, all right. Ms. Eaton, Mr. Lindsay is going to show or talk about some alleged screenshots from Mr. Morphew's phone in January of 2020 where it looks like looking for a woman, naked pictures and that kind of thing in the period of a day. There's no foundation that they are actually Mr. Morphew searching. The phones between Macy Morphew and Mr. Morphew are very intertwined, and it's unknown how. That's one issue, is foundation. Checking his phone and whatever she might be doing on his phone. At this point, they don't have foundation to lay regarding who did that and where they came from. We're talking about looking at naked pictures of women in January 2020, and that is highly prejudicial and intrusive. We're talking in terms of a murder. What I was talking about was an affair. An affair isn't looking at naked pictures. So I would object to these pictures and the content coming in to this trial. Mr. Lindsay, just the door they opened, I'm allowed to go to Ashley Madison Screenshot, which is a dating website. Judge, Ms. Eaton, his phone is very intertwined. There's a lot of pictures between, but I can't recross. Judge, you can voir dire. 3 hours establishing an affair. I think this is fair redirect. It's an internet search, Ms. Eaton. That's all it is. Judge, understood. Mr. Lindsay, so did the FBI in the course of this investigation look over Mr. Morphew's phone and look for images that potentially could be used in questioning Mr. Morphew? Yes. And were some of those images more or less dating websites? Yes. There were some deleted web history on his phone that showed searching Ashley Madison, and then the thing you said previously, a web searching for a cute girl in Salida. Ms. Eaton, objection, Your Honor. Judge, it's a foundation objection, and because Ms. Eaton, this is not an exhibit, correct? Mr. Lindsay, no, Judge. Judge Murphy. And because Ms. Eaton cannot do recross, I'm going to allow her to voir dire just upon the foundation of what Agent Harris is talking about. So I'm going to let her ask a few questions about the foundation. Mr. Lindsay, right now? Judge. Yeah, Mr. Lindsay. Okay. Ms. Eaton, Agent Harris, we're going to talk about this Ashley Madison website search that you claim was on Mr. Morphew's phone. Yes, and you know that Suzanne Morphew, Macy Morphew, and Barry Morphew shared an iCloud account, correct? Yes, and so you don't know who made that search on Mr. Morphew's phone, do you? I do not. You do not know if Ms. Morphew might have made the search on Mr. Morphew's phone, correct? I do not. You know that Barry's phone download provided in Discovery includes photos and searches for more than Barry's phone, including things on Macy's Instagram account, correct? I don't remember what the specific content is, but yes, there are some things on his phone phone that appear to be from other people. And that search you're talking about that occurred in January of 2020, you didn't see any follow-up regarding that web search for Ashley Madison, correct? Correct, Miss Eaton. I have no more questions. Judge: Okay, Miss Eaton. In your honor, I would renew my objection to admissibility. Judge: I'm going to overrule the objection. I understand the point you're making, but again, I think that goes more to the weight I should give the evidence. Mr. Lindsay: You guys actually confronted Mr. Morphew about this in the interview in March, correct? I don't remember which interview it was, but we did ask him about it, yes. And do you remember him acknowledging looking at a website called Celebrity Jihad? I do. Miss Eaton: Objection, Your Honor. I think we discussed this up at the bench. I thought we were only going into one area, and now we're going outside of that. Mr. Lindsay: This is for foundation purposes, Judge. Judge Murphy: I don't even understand the question. Celebrity what? Jihad. Judge: Jihad? Mr. Lindsay: It's a pornographic website, Judge. Miss Eaton: Your Honor, may we approach? Judge: All right, Miss Eaton. I thought we were just talking about Ashley Madison, and now all of a sudden. Judge: I thought we were talking girls in Salida and Ashley Madison. Mr. Lindsay: So the objection from them is foundation, and part of the foundation is he acknowledges that website. Judge: Which website? Mr. Lindsay: The Celebrity Jihad, which is a pornographic celebrities, Nikki. So he acknowledges that. So that's foundational as to all of these images. Judge: Agent Harris has testified that there were other searches on the phone, so I'm going to sustain this objection. Mr. Lindsay: The image of Suzanne has been completely trashed by the defense. Mr. Morphew is the victim of all of this, and it's fair to rehabilitate her image after all the destruction that they've put up there, and that's what we're doing. We've had an hour and a half of cross-examination on top of another hour and a half of cross-examination yesterday, and lots of doors were opened, and I'm able to go through those doors. Miss Eaton: This is about a murder, not making somebody look bad. Mr. Lindsay: I understand. Judge: I'm going to sustain the objection. Mr. Lindsay: The two images that were obtained, the dating website Ashley Madison and the other Find a Cute Girl Near Salida, did you guys ask Mr. Morphew about those images that were pulled from his actual phone? We did, and in fact, on the screenshot of Ashley Madison website, it says Ashley Madison have an affair. Correct. There was some discussion yesterday about Sheila Oliver and Holly Wilson, and it seemed like there was a great deal of confusion between who was what to Suzanne. Who was Suzanne's best friend, Agent Harris? Sheila Oliver. And who communicated with Suzanne the most? From your review of Suzanne's emails, text messages, her iCloud, I think in terms of longevity, Sheila Oliver and Suzanne have the longer standing friendship in which they're communicating all the time. Holly Wilson and Suzanne did have a friendship as well, but it wasn't as long standing, and they were communicating quite a bit from 2017 through 2020 as well. Is Holly the one that actually started recording Mr. Morphew on her own? Yes. Unbeknownst to law enforcement? Yes. And then did she eventually convert into becoming a confidential human source? She did. When she spoke to Barry, and just generally speaking, was there ever any accusation when she's speaking about the relationship between Suzanne and Barry that Barry made about Suzanne taking any money from him? Not that I recall, no. Was there ever any suggestion that she had secreted herself away from Barry? No. In fact, Barry tells her things like, I've hired an agent. I've hired a retired FBI guy. Yes, and he's got some good bunch of details that are helpful to the case. Yes, Barry talked about having a retired FBI agent that he was paying for information. He was telling Ms. Wilson that he was getting really good things, but eventually at the end told him that he wasted $50,000 and didn't have anything different than what law enforcement had. Barry is convinced in December or November that Suzanne is secreted away in some dude's basement. Yes, He talks about that with Ms. Wilson, and he talked about what he was going to do to this guy, right? Correct. What do you recall him saying? I don't remember the specifics, but essentially he would harm him if he found him. Do you recall him saying, "We're going to screw somebody up. If I find this dude, I'm going to shoot his freaking balls off, and I'm going to cut them off, and I'm going to put them down his throat"? That sounds familiar, yes. And that was a quote to Holly, yes. Do you remember Holly also when she started asking about Friday night? So, Friday night, May 8th, May 9th is Saturday, but talking about Friday night, how he responded to her? Sorry, I don't recall exactly what you're asking. Do you recall Holly telling you guys that there was a response, that his facial expressions were disturbing? Yes. Do you recall him also looking her in the eye and challenging her? Yes. And that at some point Holly asked Barry the last thing he said to his wife, the last thing he said to her. You remember what his response to Holly was? I'm sorry, I do not. Do you remember him being stumbling and hesitating? Yes, according to Holly. And then finally, you recall her confronting Barry Morphew and having her tell him that Suzanne was planning on leaving him? Yes, and that information is backed up by this text. Miss Eaton. Objection, Your Honor. Can there be foundation as to dates? Judge. Which text are you talking about? Mr. Lindsay. The text that was discussed on the cross-examination, May 6th. Judge, can you refer me and Agent Harris to that text or what it says? Mr. Lindsay, if I can just approach? Judge, that's fine. Miss Eaton, Your Honor, I'd ask that he also describe the date of the conversation that is being had with Ms. Wilson. Mr. Lindsay, I'm doing two things at once, Judge. Let me get the first one done. Judge, okay, but I agree we need the dates. Mr. Lindsay, November 6th is the date that I'm talking about, Agent Harris. For the text? Not for the text. We're backing up based on defense counsel's objection. This is when his facial expressions are disturbing, where he's stumbling and hesitating with last words, and that Suzanne is leaving Barry. Miss Eaton, objection, Your Honor. Leading. I don't think he should read from the report. I think, Judge, well, he's already stated that into the record. So I think we're just trying to get him to the statement so we can get the date. Mr. Lindsay, that's all I was doing, was trying to... Judge, I know. Mr. Lindsay, explain to him the date. Judge, I know, so can we get the date? Yes, that's correct. Mr. Lindsay, November 6th. Yes, of 2020. Yes. So, I handed you what's being marked as People's Exhibit 56. Do you recognize that? I do. Is that in fact the text that defense counsel was referring to on cross-examination? Yes. And what do you know the date of that text to be? May 6th, 2020, 4 days before Suzanne goes missing. Yeah, this is the "I'm done, I could care less what you are up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly" from Suzanne to Barry. Where was that text obtained from? From Barry's phone. And was it something that was sort of, you searched his phone and you found it, just popped right up? No. This was found in some sort of a cache that when someone swipes delete an image, it's stored there. So if you delete text messages in other places, it wouldn't necessarily delete this. Mr. Lindsay, Judge, may we publish that exhibit, please? Judge Murphy, yes. Mr. Lindsay, move to admit and publish. Judge, any objection? Miss Eaton, no, Your Honor. Judge, 56 is admitted. Mr. Lindsay, is this in fact confirmed what Holly's telling Mr. Morphew on November 6th? Miss Eaton, objection, Your Honor. What's the connection between May 6th and November 6th? Judge, can you help me out on that? I'm sorry, I lost it too. Mr. Lindsay, so one of the things she says on November 6th is Barry is leaving. Suzanne Morphew is leaving Barry. And is this confirmation of that? Yes. Judge, so the November 6th conversation is between Sheila and Barry? Mr. Lindsay, no, Holly. Judge Murphy, Holly and Barry. Did Holly know about this text? Mr. Lindsay, I don't believe so. Judge: so what's the connection, Mr. Lindsay? The connection is that's what's happening. That's in fact, she is leaving Mr. Morphew. Miss Eaton: Your Honor, what's the relevance to his opinion? Judge: Yeah, I'm not seeing the connection between the two. They're both freestanding pieces of evidence. I don't necessarily know why they need to be connected, and I don't understand the connection. Mr. Lindsay: We'll move on, Judge. In your work, in this case, in reviewing all of the evidence, the text messages, the communications, does this appear to be a significant step for Ms. Morphew? Yes. And can you explain that a little bit? Well, as we saw in the text messages between Sheila and Suzanne, she had talked about wanting to be done for some time. Conversations where she had talked about it with Mr. Morphew, but at some point she even says, I've not come out and said it until today, something like that. So this statement is saying that she's done and wants to do this civilly seems to be, well, it's an indication that she is saying this to Mr. Morphew directly and saying, we are finished. Miss Eaton: Objection, Your Honor. That's speculation, and that's interpretation of a text message that this witness has no idea about. It is what it is. Mr. Lindsay: That's not accurate, Judge. Judge Murphy: Well, he testified in the context of the text messages that he had looked through. I think the text speaks freely for itself. So I'm going to overrule the objection, but I don't necessarily think we need Agent Harris's interpretation of that text to figure out what it might mean. Ms. Eaton: Your Honor, I thought I established on cross-examination that this text was about money. So I guess his interpretation that they're finished is different than what comes later in their exchange. Judge: Well, Ms. Eaton: Misleading. Judge: I'm the one that has to puzzle out what this text means. Ms. Eaton: Sure. Mr. Lindsay: Does it appear, if you look at this text, that the reference years and years is possibly about money? You're asking me if what you've been up to for years could possibly be about money? Possibly about affairs? Yes. Ms. Eaton: Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. Judge Murphy: Well, you just made the point that could be referencing money or Mr. Morphew having an affair or some behavior. Miss Eaton: But why is this witness getting to speculate about what a single text message means? The court earlier stated. Judge Murphy: The point I'm trying to make is this. I have to figure out what that text means. I know that there's a text that follows it that puts it in some context. I think it could be argued both ways. Ultimately, I have to figure that out. It's not particularly helpful for Agent Harris to tell me what his interpretation is because there could be another. Mr. Lindsay: Let's talk about Mr. Libler. Did you guys speak to him in depth about what he was doing in May? Yes. What were you able to find out? Where was he? He was in Michigan and he was working on installing a dock project. You can see some of the references in the messages between he and Suzanne about going to Menards to get supplies for that. And did you confirm that through credit cards? Yes. Did you also look at where his phone was using a signal? Yes, I think I mentioned this to Miss Eaton before. There was a cast report that shows that his phone was pinging off the tower, I believe in Brighton, Michigan on May 10th. Did you ask Mr. Libler on cross-examination that there was a statement that Mr. Libler carried a torch for Suzanne? Did you ask him what he meant by that? We did. What did he say? After that first meeting in 1989, he often thought of her and cared for her, and so thought of her throughout the years between then and when she reached out and connected to him. There was also a question that Ms. Morphew thought that Barry was simple and not stimulating intellectually. You remember that line of questioning? I do. Sounds like the opposite of Mr. Libler. That's the way Mr. Libler described himself and the way some of Suzanne's messages described him, as she really liked their conversations and she liked somebody who was interested in her for her thoughts. She, at some point, said she didn't think she was very smart, and Mr. Libler complimented her and said that he enjoyed their conversations. At one point, there was a question that Mr. Libbler felt like he was supporting getting Suzanne living on her own without Mr. Morphew. Correct. And what did he mean by that? In their conversations and talking to Mr. Libbler, he always understood that for Suzanne to get out on her own, but still be in contact with her girls, and possibly still be in Colorado, that was what he understood to mean her getting on her own. Was May 9th the last time that Mr. Libbler reached out to Suzanne? No. When did he last reach out to her? So, there were LinkedIn messages that he left for Mother's Day, and then also another one on the 11th, a message about her treatment day. He said it wasn't out of the norm for her not to respond on those 2 days because it was a day he expected the family would be home, or she was doing treatment. So I think the 11th was his last message to her on LinkedIn. You said there was a message on Mother's Day. Do you recall some of the information contained in that message? Yeah, it was a message wishing her a happy Mother's Day, talking about her spending time with the girls, knowing it was a hard day for her because she missed her mom, Adrian. I don't remember the rest of it. And you said there was a message on May 11th? And you said that was a treatment day? What do you understand that to mean? So Suzanne was supposed to have a cancer treatment on Monday, May 11th, and Mr. Libbler knew that. She ever respond to any of those messages? She did not. Those are my questions, Judge Murphy. We're about halfway through the morning session, so probably a good time to take a break. We'll be in recess for about 10 minutes. So there was a pause in the proceedings from 10:30 a.m. until 10:42 a.m. at that point. When they go back on the record, Mr. Lindsay is going to call former Agent Jonathan Grusing to the stand. This is when we'll get into other topics such as his record, more victimology, more correspondence between Mr. and Mrs. Morphew, and we'll start speaking about Barry Morphew's Ford F-350, more technical things. We'll get into all of Barry's movements, especially on Saturday, May 9th and Sunday, May 10th. As always, thank you so much for listening to all of this. We're making our way through. I think the things that stood out the most to me in this part where Mr. Lindsay was really defending Suzanne and just how much prosecution attempted to rip her reputation to shreds and make Barry appear as the victim. I find those proceedings really interesting, and I wish, of course, we had everything. It sounds like at some point there was a break in the recording. One thing that really reminded me of Shanann Watts. She had a doctor's appointment, of course, that she missed because her life was taken. And those are some parallels. Suzanne Morphew had an appointment also that Monday, the day after she was reported missing. There was plenty of focus on actual text messages. There was so much confusion about dates. The confusion about dates was really frustrating. I wish everyone, those questioning, those being questioned, just had the correct dates of everything right in front of them. I think that could have saved time and a lot of confusion. But you see at a point here where they start speaking about Macy texting Suzanne and saying, "Oh, Dad made biscuits, are you awake?" And only almost an hour later, Suzanne said to Macy, "Oh, I just woke up." But apparently it looks as if Suzanne had already perhaps been texting Jeff back. All we see is the fact that Jeff texted her, "Wish I had woke up next to you." The dates get convoluted, but the prosecution is attempting to defend Suzanne's tattered reputation while Barry's defense lawyers are just making, again, Suzanne seem like this conniving woman who stole $70,000 and didn't even text her daughter back while texting with Jeff while Barry's downstairs making biscuits. And of course they highlight the text where Barry does, to me, sound like a gaslighting, manipulative narcissist where he's claiming he's never ever cheated on Suzanne ever, and he's just so hurt he has to get over hurt heart. This part was interesting, where the witness said, "Miss Eaton, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just don't have those in front of me." I hope witnesses are allowed to just bring their binders up in front of them, especially this agent who was being asked so many things about actual quotes and date. But you can tell that defense is trying to lay the groundwork that Barry was never abusive at all, just because other people had never testified to such a thing. They talked a bit about Suzanne's text when she said, "Look, I'm done. I could care less what you've been up to for years." What did she literally mean by that? I think we're going to get into that later, where defense is going to try and claim, "Oh, Suzanne just meant I'm done with coffee," which doesn't make much sense. And this whole Barry message is just this entire message from Barry. "I'm sorry things went the way they did. I have a problem dealing with the way you accuse me of hiding checks." And it just sounds really, woe is me. I'm so innocent. All I do is for you and the girls. All. When I'm dead, which won't be long, you guys will be taken care of. And he's saying, if I can control my hurt heart, I think I can overcome your distant unlovingness toward me. And I'm kind of comparing this with Suzanne telling her friend, "I think he's scared of my pull away." It feels like, in my opinion, Barry had manipulated Suzanne for years, and once she was finally done, he could no longer manipulate her with scripture. "Oh, 7 times 70, 70 times 7, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me." We don't know the details about what. When she had finally said enough and was finally done, even, of course, she didn't do it the right way by having an affair with a married man, father to 6 children. That's not what I'm saying, but she was finally attempting to leave the marriage. Barry is saying, if I can control my hurt heart, I think I can overcome your distant unlovingness towards me. So he's pointing to Suzanne's distant unlovingness toward him, but he doesn't really talk about anything he's done wrong. He never confesses or admits to cheating if he has ever had any affairs. It sounds like he was a workaholic. Sounds like there were a lot of money problems. But he's saying, "Honey, I swear it's the hardest thing I've had to do. I love you. I always will." But my question is, what if he couldn't control his hurt heart? What if he couldn't overcome her quote-unquote distant unlovingness toward him? And why was she supposedly distant and unloving toward him? Because did Suzanne decide to no longer put up with his BS, and all of a sudden she's distant and unloving? And his other texts just sound like lines of BS to me. Someone who's trying to control someone else. "I promise you are wrong about all the crazy thoughts about me." So any doubts Suzanne had, Barry seemingly is attempting to say she's the crazy one. He's always been faithful, always. Why would he ever want another when he's married to the most beautiful, sweet, kind, loving woman as you? Only a fool would stray from an angel like you. It just sounds like a real line. Anybody would know after 32 years being together. Of course, someone might find someone else attractive, but he's just making it seem like, "I've always been faithful. I've only had eyes for you. Most beautiful, sweet, kind, loving woman is you. Only a fool would stray from an angel like you." I don't know, it just sounds like a crock to me. There was moonlight pizza. There were other messages. That's where we are in day 2. We will finish going through other parts of day 2 because it's really helpful to read the actual transcripts, giving us a little bit more context and detail. And I really do feel sympathy for the journalist who had to cover this, because I can't imagine all this confusion. I see why only certain partial quotes came out. I'm grateful we get to see some of the fuller quotes through the court transcript. They help us figure out in the public what was going on. Let's close with 1 Peter 3:8. "Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble." Yeah, let's hope we can follow that edict in the comment section and beyond in our everyday lives. Having compassion, most of all, seeking justice for victims who have been harmed. Thank you so much for watching.